And good morning again, though the news this morning is not very good, not good at all. But here is the latest. The Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan said today the disaster that had hit his country, and we're quoting him directly here, is the worst crisis for Japan since World War II. The death toll is now likely to go beyond 10,000 in just one state alone. It turns out the quake damaged 2 nuclear reactors at a power plant on the coast, maybe 3. One of them seems to be going through a partial meltdown, which means radiation could leak. We have a team of CBS News correspondents in Japan this morning. CBS News correspondent Celia Hatton is in Fukushima, the site of that nuclear power plant. Celia, what is the latest there?
Well, Bob, it's been another day of grim news coming from the Fukushima nuclear plant. Now, just a few hours ago, authorities warned that the situation to prevent total meltdown at 3 faulty nuclear reactors is an ongoing challenge. They warned that if something happens to one reactor, it could affect the others nearby. So generator number 3 is now the most at risk for an outer container explosion like the one that took place a day ago on generator number 1. That's when officials did the only thing they could to prevent the entire reactor from blasting open. They released a bit of radioactive steam to reduce pressure in that generator number 1, which led to a larger than expected explosion. So that's what we look for that could be coming from generator number 3 in the next day or so. It seems likely that officials are going to have to do a similar operation on generator number 3. So unfortunately, we're expecting more explosions from that nuclear plant.
Now, how many people have been evacuated from there thus far?
At the moment, the average number is 170, although estimates do vary. I've seen as high as 200,000 people evacuated from that 12-mile radius, and even a little bit beyond that, because frankly, nobody wants to be that close to these nuclear plants at the moment. So there are large numbers of people who are on the move in the area trying to escape.
And what about radiation sickness? Any signs of that? I know they have started issuing iodine for people just in case. What's that situation?
They're handing out iodine tablets to people who are within a certain area around the nuclear plant. Not everybody is getting the iodine pills, but they are trying to scan everybody for any effects of radiation. So far, again, there are varying numbers as to how many people are affected by radiation. But actually, at this point, Bob, it's very difficult to know whether their health has been affected in the long term. We simply don't know enough about the situation at the moment.
How are the people taking it there, Celia?
You know, it's been really interesting watching the reactions over the past 2 days. Definitely anxiety and concern is mounting on this day 2 that I've been able to watch the people here. You know, it's fascinating. The televisions are on in every room at all, well, any place that has electricity. People are just gathered around watching these televisions 24 hours a day, trying to find any news they can about the nuclear reactor. And of course, here that means the difference as to whether they can go back to their family home or not. It really is quite serious. But at the same time, when there's a strong aftershock, nobody here seems to blink except for me, because I'm not as used to earthquakes here as the people who've grown up here their whole lives. So it really is. It's been a very sad and frustrating situation for many of the people here.
Well, Celia, thank you so much. Obviously, you're going to stay on the job there. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
Now, Harry Smith, our man on the move who was just back from the Middle East, is in Tokyo this morning, which for all the troubles is returning to relative normalcy. Harry, what's the latest there?
Stunning difference, Bob, between Friday and today. Narita Airport, the big airport, wide open, business as usual. The only difference that I would say we saw there were numerous crews, rescue crews, that had clearly been flown in there and were about to be deployed up north. As far as downtown Tokyo is concerned, we didn't see a single vestige of earthquake damage. People were strolling through the park. It was a Sunday afternoon as if nothing had happened.
But that is very much in contrast to what's going on in the rest of the country.
Yeah, that's for sure, Bob, because everything up north is basically on kind of a lockdown. I'm not sure if you've heard this or not, but there are more than 100,000 troops that are going to be deployed here in Japan through this disaster. As the Japanese Prime Minister said, this is the worst disaster to hit Japan since World War II. And even people here, as far away from the earthquake epicenter as Tokyo was, they said this was the worst they had ever felt. They felt like they were literally rocking back and forth in the buildings. And it also speaks to how earthquake-proof Tokyo is, because as we say, as we came through town, we didn't see a single vestige of damage anyplace.
But as you go around the country, I mean, the statistics that we're hearing from the government are just almost unbelievable. 215,000 people living in 1,300 temporary shelters. 1.5 million households have not had water since the quake. You mentioned the 60,000 or the 100,000 troops that have been deployed. It's hard to imagine something like this happening to this country.
You know, and it's interesting because there's no place on the planet that is better prepared for this than Japan is. Earthquake is almost a part of people's daily mantra, as it were. It's something they keep in mind all the time. There are all constant civil defense drills. There are constant drills for sirens and evacuations. So this is maybe the place on the planet that's best prepared for something like this. And then you see the kind of devastation and damage that has happened as a result, and you wondered if it had happened someplace else. It's hard to imagine, but it would have been much, much, much worse.
Harry Smith, the coastal city of Sendai is closest to the epicenter, and our CBS News correspondent Bill Whitaker is there.
Hello, Bob. I'm in the offices of TBC Television here in Sendai City, one of the few places in the city to have power. This television station is now running off of generator power. It took us 15 hours to get here from Tokyo, and this is a ride that usually takes about 4 to 5 hours. But most of the roads coming into Sendai have either been damaged or closed down by authorities. This is one of the hardest hit cities in all of Japan. Tonight outside, the night air is filled with the wail of sirens, of fire engines racing down to a massive fire by the port, a fire so big that it's turned the whole eastern sky into a bright orange red. When we got here earlier this afternoon, we saw people running to high ground. They had just had another aftershock and another warning of another tsunami. People here are very frightened and very skittish, and they have good reason to be. Not only did they endure one of the worst earthquakes ever recorded here in Japan, but people say it was 30 minutes after that the huge tsunami swept through. And from what we could see, the tsunami swept in several miles inland. It's kind of hard to explain the power of that surging water, but we saw tanker trucks and 18-wheelers and cars and even planes flipped upside down, thrown aside, thrown around as if they were pieces of paper. And tonight here, the city is without power, without telephone, without water. It seems it'll be some time before Sendai can get back on its feet. Bob?
Bill Whitaker. Thank you, Bill. CBS News correspondent Lucy Kraft has been covering this thing since it first hit. Lucy, how are the Japanese people taking all of this?
Well, the question on everybody's lips is, we're the most technologically advanced country in the world, one of them. We're one of the richest countries in the world. We know about disaster prevention. We have a state-of-the-art system. How on earth did this happen? And a lot of criticism is being leveled at the government for coming at this flat-footed. But it has to be said that the one phrase that's on the lips of all the government spokespeople and a lot of the university professors who study disasters is sotegai, a phrase that means this was beyond our expectations. This was not in the textbooks. We had a nuclear power plant that had backup system upon backup system upon backup system, and yet it was helpless against these huge tsunami. Some interesting facts. For example, the Kobe earthquake, which was a magnitude 7, this lasted for the tremors lasted for a matter of a few seconds. This earthquake that we just had the other day lasted for 5 minutes. Again, beyond the experience of anyone in Japan. A tsunami. The textbooks say that a tsunami comes an hour after a major earthquake. In this case, people had 9 minutes warning before the first giant tsunami started striking the shore. So this was well beyond anybody's planning design. Another question is, the rescue teams have been unable to get to all of the victims because they're spread over such a wide area. And Japan right now is terribly depopulated. We have people living in very remote areas, particularly elderly people living in homes that just fall apart at the first sign of an earthquake. Maybe we need to have people living more closely together out of areas that are at higher risk. So there's a lot of soul searching that's going to be happening, and as the Prime Minister said, it's the worst crisis for Japan since World War II. Right now, I think the country is just in a state of shock. There's a lot of questions now. One of the newspapers, the Yomiuri, this morning was saying that the stock market may crash on Monday when it opens. Certainly the companies that are the pillar of the Japanese economy, as you know, is trade dependent, and the companies that are the gold standard for the country, Toyota, despite all its travails, is extremely well run, very profitable company. Sony, Honda, Nissan, all of these companies that really are the backbone of the Japanese economy are at a standstill right now because their factories have been damaged or because their supply chains are stopped. So the country really is on hold right now, and it's going to require a vast amount of rethinking about how do we deal with the crisis.
Lucy Kraft, and we want to say thanks to Lucy, to Bill Whitaker, to Harry Smith, to Celia Hatton, all of our correspondents, and there are more on the way covering this story in Japan.